Okay, everyone, welcome back. This is where we left off, the end of the three stratifications. So here's where we pick up. Abstract machine of faciality. So faciality is a white wall black hole system, Deleuze and Guattari say, situated at the intersection of two of the three strata, signification and subjectivation, and therefore between despotism and authoritarianism. And it's an abstract machine, which means it's a configuration of forces that is realized in a social form of an assemblage, of a stratified assemblage. And it acts as a redundant system or a backstop that is that for these related strata, signification, subjectivation. A redundant system is one that is not strictly necessary, but it serves as a backup for other systems when they fail. That's what your second kidney does. So if one kidney fails, you have another one, and you can live with one kidney. I include that little scene from Star Trek The Next Generation because it was that line which allowed me to figure out, when I was reading through this text, what do they mean by redundancy? Because, you think of redundancy in everyday speech as simply being something unnecessary, right? The Department of Redundancy department. It's a redundant state, Redundancies are just repeat something unnecessarily. But there is an aspect of this. Redundant systems in your body are backup systems or fail-safe systems. They're unnecessary, strictly speaking, because you already have something that performs a function. But if it fails, you need a redundant system to serve as a backup. So that's Beverly Crusher, who's referring to these, what the Klingons refer to in their physiology as the Brack-lull. So that's also what it's called. Deleuze and Guattari. Faciality is a Brack-lull. It's a redundant system. It's a redundant system that preserves the effects of signification and subjectivation when their powers fail or when they come under threat of failure. So that's the backstop. Okay, you remember the backstop? That was in all the Brexit negotiations, right? It was, if everything breaks down and there was no deal, what would the backstop be in Northern Ireland? Right? Meant to be redundant, right? Meant to never be used, meant to not be used. But that's what it's there for. So faciality is a redundancy, maybe not necessary, but it serves. And it's going to need to serve this because one of the things Deleuze and Guattari add in their understanding of all these social machines and assemblages, machining assemblages work by breaking down. So they have to have redundant systems that serve as backstops for them. Okay? Now, signification involves a system of signs that gain their meaning in relation to one another, okay, rather than in relation to an external referent. So, when we speak about trees and cats and dogs and other things, these signs, these terms that have meaning, gain their meaning and gain their place within language itself without reference to actual out in the street dogs, cats, or trees, which is why language can be used in the absence of reference. We can talk to each other about trees without there being a tree that we need to point to, say, see the tree, see the tree. And also, when we use language, we talk about trees, we're not talking about particular trees, are we? We're talking about an idea of a tree, under which all the trees we might see in the street we can recognize as trees because we have this idea attached to the word tree. Okay? So signification functions without reference, but it therefore requires a surface of inscription, and that's this whole idea of the white wall. Signs are written on some kind of surface. We could speak of signs as spoken as well. Okay, I use words, I speak words, but let's just go with the idea they're inscribed in some way. Okay, whether they're inscribed in the sense of being written down, whether they're inscribed in the sense of they're inscribed in you, so that when you hear these words from me, you can kind of read them off of your soul. Okay, I guess your neurons, your mirror cells, your mirror neurons. So you can get their meaning that way. But there's a background upon which they're inscribed. Okay? That's signification. Subjectivation involves the relation of, as I said already, of a subject to an authoritative subject. And that authoritative subject liberates it and subjects it. Being a subject is to be both free and subjected. But it will require what they say is a black hole onto which this authority lodges its hidden power. Okay? White wall, black hole. And then you can think of black and white drawings, lines, black lines drawn on a white background. Yes, I know you could reverse it too. But they wanted to go with this idea of black holes, probably more than white surfaces. So that's the point there. All right? The face itself involves both of them. So the face isn't just signification, it's not just subjectivation. It occurs or arises, it's a machine, it's an abstract machine occurring in the intersections of those two systems, how they're brought together. So the simplest drawings are enough to make a face, right? Two circles and a line for a mouth. Or Heisenberg from Breaking Bad, which is a little bit more complicated, but still it's the same kind of, that's enough to make it a face. You could make it even more simple and it would still look like a face. It would still have, it actually doesn't matter if it looks like a face. That is one of the important points. But that it has a characteristic that exercises the power of a face. It's enough to indicate the role of the face without any communication. Right? What does the face do? Deleuze and Guattari write, the form of the signifier in language, even its unit, would remain indeterminate if the potential listener did not use the face of the speaker as a guide to his or her choices. You know what body language is and facial expressions. Facial expressions are part of body language. Hey, he seems angry. He couldn't say that. You see my face when I'm talking to you. Look at me carefully. That's the bottom animation. Right? Look at me when I'm talking to you. The face carries a power with it that signification wouldn't mean very much. The meanings that are transmitted would end up being very vague unless there were some modifications here of the face, but also modifications of voice and so forth. So, a lot of things are communicated by these kinds of modulations, and the face is an important part of it. So it helps determine, anchor signification in this way, and therefore, and in particular, as these examples give you, it anchors the command functions of signification language, the ordering you to do something. That's why the face is tied up with something Deleuze and Guattari refer to elsewhere in the text as order words, commands that are spat out to you, and social hierarchy depends upon those commands being communicated to you in a way that you will act on them. You will act in as they tell you to act. So that's signification and subjectivation. And again, faciality serves as a backup. All right? And this is not going to necessarily involve faces only. That's an important part. It can involve all sorts of other things that are facialized. So the example Deleuze and Guattari give you is the police officer who has a badge and a uniform. And those are essentially backups for his or her authoritative power. Because that police officer could be Rowan Atkinson addressing you like that, and you wouldn't take that person seriously. But there's a backup to his expressions, or lack of authoritative expression, that he looks buffoonish, which is that he's got a badge and he's got a uniform. And those are facialized, Deleuze and Guattari say. And they carry a certain power, so that if the police officer is looking at you, the power that they carry is that the state is looking at you, because the police officer, by way of the uniform and the badge, is identified to you as a proxy for the state. So when the police officer's exercising authority and exercising power in that way, the whole state is bearing down on you. That's what the uniform is there for. And they're facialized. That's what Deleuze and Guattari say. So they carry the same force as the way the face communicates by making you think he looks angry, or he's kind of looking at you as, you got to look at me in the eyes, and so forth. Okay? Given this, all right, contra both Sartre and Lacan, who both refer to the face in different ways, refer to the look or to the gaze. Facialization does not only concern human faces. All sorts of things can be facialized. Uniforms, landscapes, so you hear the hills have eyes, bouncing balls, that's Kafka's Blumfeld, and more. Blumfeld, the Elderly Bachelor, is a short story that's mentioned in the Faciality Plateau. Blumfeld is this older gentleman who's a bachelor, who works in an office. I can't remember his exact job, but he discovers one day that he's being followed by these bouncing balls. It's a short story. It's an incomplete story, but you can find it. You can find it on the internet, actually. And he's just followed around by these bouncing balls, which are very irritating to him, and he can't see. So every time he keeps turning around, they keep turning around with him. Eventually he has to trap them, and what he ends up doing is he turns around with his wardrobe open behind him, and he kind of slowly moves back, so the bouncing balls that are behind him kind of bounce into the wardrobe. He quickly shuts it. But the reason they draw up on this example is the bouncing balls he can't even see, but they're following him around. They seem to be watching him. This is a facialization. Of course, the bouncing balls, like the two black holes on the white wall image. All right. Deleuze and Guattari write, even a use object may become facialized. You might say that a house, utensil, or object, or article of clothing is watching me. And that's why I decided to give you Rockwell, that's his name, I think. Somebody's Watching Me, which is a pop song from the early 80s. Like, got the feeling somebody's watching me, and I got no privacy. Anyhow, the lyrics are there as well. And you can YouTube the song. It's a catchy little song, done to a kind of spooky little refrain. Who's watching me? We live in a world where we always feel like we're being watched. Sometimes we are, right? There's that's the part of Foucault's idea of disciplining us, how we are disciplined in disciplinary society, right? The face is also a percept. That is a term that's used really later on in Deleuze's writings, and Deleuze and Guattari in the works on cinema and the works What is Philosophy, the last work. But the face is a percept, which is a sensation that's not linked to a subject or to an object. It's not consciously perceived by a subject, and it's not a perceived quality of a thing. But it does stand there as a sensation, so it has sensibility to it. But it stands, Deleuze and Guattari say, on its own. It has a sense of operating prior to subjects and objects. One of the examples they give, and this is a kind of interesting use of the face, I mentioned this last week, last lecture on Anti-Oedipus. The newborn infant uses its mother's face as a percept to find the breast without being, in order to feed, right? So there is a way that you can see this, and infants kind of look, kind of at a face. They're infants, okay? They're not yet subjects. They don't have language. They don't have conceptual thought. They don't know that this is their mother. They don't know what a mother is, etc. So, and they have an interest in a human face without yet knowing that they have a face, right? Because the face is the recognition in the mirror, doesn't, as Lacan himself discusses in the ideas of the mirror stage. That comes when infants are about 6 months old. And you can see it. They suddenly take delight in seeing their own image, because there's this point where they suddenly seem to recognize, that's me. It's helped by the fact that, and I can tell you as a parent who's done this, you hold up your infant to the mirror and say, that's you, and they kind of look at you, and you say, that's you, yep, that's you. They look back to check, too. But this isn't like that. So the face here, the face of the mother, is a percept, because the mother it's not yet the mother's face for the infant. The infant isn't yet a subject. The mother isn't yet an object. All right. Faciality functions at that level. All right. Which is also why it doesn't need to be an actual face, doesn't need to look like a face to carry its power. Okay. Now the infant example, by the way, carries a different kind of power. It shows you a kind of faciality that doesn't reinforce signification and subjectivation, because there's no signification and subjectivation to be enforced at this stage of an infant's of a newborn's life. Okay, let's continue. Power of the facialized objects reflects the fact that faciality is an abstract machine, arrangement and configuration of forces. So it doesn't need to resemble the regime that the face engenders. Okay? All you need is for this kind of something to be facialized, the scene to be watching you. And the faciality machine, as an abstract machine, is then embodied in certain machinic assemblages or social machines that require the face, that require this backup system for their operation. And the terms the terms for the social machines that Deleuze and Guattari use here are the same as in Anti-Oedipus. There's the primitive machine, the barbarian despotic machine, the civilized capitalist machine. It's only going to be the barbarian despot and the civilized capitalist machines that actually need the face, or need this faciality machine, I should say. Primitive territorial machines, they say, don't, because their hierarchies aren't constructed through signification and subjectivation. Now, as I say, faciality goes back and forth between signification and subjectivation. It matters which are a despotic system and an authoritarian system. That's why I decided to stick these two faces and morph them together. That Silvio Berlusconi and Hosni Mubarak is definitely the despot, right? He was a military dictator in Egypt. Well, Berlusconi wasn't a dictator, but he was certainly an authoritarian. He controlled the media, etc., etc. It was when Mubarak was overthrown, it was during the Arab Spring, that I suddenly realized, they look actually the same. They look like misshapen versions of each other, don't they? That's why they morph together. They pass from one to the other so easily. But they represent, you could say, the two ends of the pendulum swing that faciality passes between, the authoritarian end, the despotic end. And those are the two systems, really. Those are the two kinds of systems that require the face in some way as their backup system. Okay? The capitalist machine, that's the special one in this regard. There are all sorts of different societies, and some of them need an authoritarian face, and some of them need a despotic face, and they need mixtures usually. So they need something which is sometimes authoritarian, but primarily despotic, or primarily authoritarian, and sometimes vice versa. In capitalism, these two kinds of faces, authoritarian face, despotic face, they completely interpenetrate, Deleuze and Guattari say. What marks capitalism as a form of social organization, as a stratification of the body, the consciousness, and the unconscious, is that both signification and subjectivation come together, that they're found together and they operate together. They completely interpenetrate. They're completely mixed. And they're coextensive with each other. And so the structures of both the despotic and the authoritarian orders are kind of put together. And it's here that they say the white wall black hole system assumes its full scope. So only faciality, that's the only machine that can bring together the two stratifications, the stratification of language and the unconscious on one side, the stratification of the subject on the other. Once that's done, this is the argument I've already mentioned, the organism, that stratification of the body, it is part of this capitalist assemblage, but it's secondary. The body is organized to reflect the organization of the unconscious and the organization of the subject. Okay? And that's because what capitalism is about, in the end, it's not about keeping order. For example, the way Foucault talks about this old sovereign form of control, which keeps order through threat of punishment and threat of death. This is the system that keeps order by commanding you in some way, cajoling you in some way, to buy crap. I want you to buy this crap. Okay? Faciality is, Deleuze and Guattari will say, an absolute but negative deterritorialization. What it does is it frees the head to become a face. It frees, in the same way, the hands, the paws to become hands, etc., to use tools and so forth. And it's off of that, Deleuze and Guattari say, that all of the other, that signification and subjectivation can work. Because they have to work through language, and they have to work through faces. And they have to work through a relation of authority and subordination and so forth. So that's why the evolution of the human, from our ancestors who walked on four legs to standing straight up, to ending up properly stratified in all three senses, in the sense of the body, the unconscious, and its subjectivity, sitting in front of the computer screen, right? All of those ways in which the body, soul, and consciousness, body, unconscious, and consciousness, are organized or reterritorialized, happen because faciality deterritorializes us, in the sense of raising us, in a sense, you could say, from the animal to the human. So it becomes absolute in the sense of being unconditioned, because all the other things that happen off of it. It's because of the faciality machine deterritorializing us from our primitive condition that all the other reterritorializations can happen. So it's the unconditioned itself, but it's the condition under which we are reterritorialized into that figure on the right, on the far right, sitting in front of the computer screen. Okay? So let's look now at the despotic face versus the authoritarian face. Okay? The despotic face is the forward-facing face. All right? The model of it, you could think. What is the black hole white wall system? Is the eyes are looking at you. Okay? The black holes for eyes are distributed across the white wall of signification. And what they signify is the omnipresence of the despot and its representatives. So all these eyes looking. Now there's a subjectifying element to that because you're being looked at. There's the gaze. And so that is a form of subjectivation. It turns us into subjects because it relates us to this other by way of this gaze. But according to Deleuze and Guattari, under this system, this despotic system, that subjectification is subordinated to the signification of the despot's power. What the eyes are really there to do in looking at you isn't to turn you into a subordinate subject, but to reinforce that the despot stands above you and is all-powerful and could destroy you, right? The same way Foucault talks about the sovereign can destroy your body. So there's a subjectifying aspect to it, but what really is going on is that's being subordinated to the signification of the despot's power and that the communication of that power. So that's the forward face. Authoritarian face is always two faces, and they're either looking at each other or they're looking away from each other. Because the subject is constituted in relation to another subject, it's either subordinate to it, or it flees from it, or it has some relation to it, but it always involves the two faces. And so it's not this multiplication of eyes on this white background, it's this line, they say, which traces out the profile face. And then the eyes, usually just a black line on the figure. I didn't do that with these, but I rotated them, which I thought was I prefer to do that than to make the eyes. But that's going to be the profile face versus the forward face. Forward face with many eyes, so many eyes that it doesn't look like a face anymore. The profiles, looking either at each other or away from each other, are the various ways in which the two subjects constitute each other by relating to each other. And in that sense, in the second sense, the subjectifying relation is what assumes priority over any other kinds of acts of signification. It's the establishment of the authority and subordination rather than the establishment of power. Okay? Real social systems require mixtures of them, already mentioned. Some are more despotic, occasionally authoritarian, some are more authoritarian, occasionally despotic. So the mixtures can be quite diverse. And they always presuppose, quote, assemblages of power that act through signifiers and act upon the souls and subjects. That's going to make the face, which is part of the faciality machine, even though the faciality machine doesn't necessarily need to look, the machine doesn't need to look like a face, but it makes it political. The face is a politics. Right? And the face, as this thing that's kind of between these two stratifications and serves as a backup for them, on the one hand it relates to an abstract machine of faciality that produces it, without that machine resembling a face, and then on the assemblages of power that require it, okay, that require the machine to secure itself. The face, you could say, stands in between the machine, the faciality machine, the assemblage. That's supposed to be my serious face, which I've changed to my political face. Is Team America World Police, is that too ancient for you? It's less ancient than some of the other references I do give you, I suppose. Okay. Christ and the faciality machine. This is going to be a good place to stop. Okay. Why don't we stop here, and then we can pick up, because I think we can make this a 3-part lecture, and I think it'll be a little bit shorter, maybe, than the other lectures we've had. That'd be a good way to finish, having given you a 3-hour and 10-minute lecture last time. So I will let you go, and I will see you for the next part, part 3.